Hi, this is McCoy Buck, and in this video, we're going to be talking about the hierarchy panel and understanding the hierarchical order of our bones. So one of the first things I'm going to do to make this easier for myself is I'm going to bring this over top of our character so we can kind of gray that out for the moment. As you can see, as I'm hovering over these different bones in my hierarchy panel, it's highlighting where those bones are in my stage, which can be really handy. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to rename a few of these bones. You can rename your bone by simply double clicking and renaming it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to name those three bones right here: the hip root bone, the torso bone, and the head bone. Notice as I'm hovering over, none of the joints are being highlighted. Just know that the ball that is connected to the end of the bone is also part of that bone. These joints actually come more in handy once we get into the animation stage. And now what I'm going to do with the two arm bones is I'm actually going to click and hold down Shift, and I'm going to highlight both of those root bones and hit delete on my keyboard. And as you can see, it's going to remove both of those arm bones from my hierarchy. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the exact same example that I showed you from the last video. I'm first going to create a root bone from this torso, and then I'm going to create another root bone for the arm independent of any of the other bones. Now, rather than watching what's happening here on stage, watch what's happening here on the left. So right now I'm highlighting my torso bone. As you can see, I'm hitting B on my keyboard. I'm creating my root bone for the shoulder on the right arm, creating the arm and the forearm. Now, as you can see there, I have these new set of bones that have populated. Now again, watching just the hierarchy, watch what happens when I now create a new set of bones without first selecting the torso area. So now I'm going to create my root bone, my arm, and my forearm. Now you probably have noticed something different. Inside of my hip root bone, I have nested all of these bones right here, that as I highlight, you can see them on stage. However, when I didn't select the torso bone, this root bone is now outside of this nesting order. Now, if you're already familiar with Photoshop and how group layers work and things like that, this will be familiar to you. But if this is your first time figuring out how hierarchy works with bones and things like that, this will be most beneficial to you. So just like I showed in the last video, when I created that other root bone and I discovered that as I was rotating this torso backwards and forwards, it wasn't following. That's because this root bone for the left arm is outside of the hierarchy for the torso bone that we were connecting to. Now watch what happens when I retract these hierarchies. This gives you a really good idea as to what this hip bone has inside of its hierarchy. Again, for the torso bone, real quick, I'm going to label this right arm. Now inside of that right arm, I have my arm and my forearm. So I'm going to go ahead and retract that. Now inside of my torso bone, I have my torso and I have my head. However, you can see when I retract this, it also retracts the right arm bone. That's because the right arm bone is nested inside of the torso bone. Instead of having to delete this whole left arm and then creating a root bone from the selection of first selecting the torso and drawing out the arm, all I'm going to do is I'm going to take this root bone, making sure that I'm selecting the root bone. You can see I have it here. It's the diamond shape. The diamond shape represents my root bone, and these symbols here represent my regular bones. As I drag my root bone into the torso bone, watch what happens. It now becomes nested inside of the torso bone hierarchy. So if I retract that, you can see it's hidden. That's because it's inside of that. Now, again, let's go ahead and let's rotate now this torso area. And you can now see our problem is solved. We didn't have to go through and recreate those bones. All we had to do is just make sure that that set of bones was nested inside of the correct bone hierarchy. I hope this makes sense. If it doesn't and you need any more clarification, be sure to jump into the conversations or the forums on twodimensions.com and we'll answer your questions there. In the next video, we're going to cover two things. We're going to talk about the parent-to-child relationship and inverse kinematics and how that works when we set up our targets. I'll see you there.